Hello everyone, welcome to Yatharth IAS. So today we'll be talking about this very important concept of equality, and in this lecture we'll understand the conceptual aspects of equality as well as what equality means in the Indian context. So it's going to be a culmination of theory as well as the polity aspect of equality. So let's get started. Now first thing first, these are the topics that we are going to cover. We'll start by understanding what is equality. We'll move over to the types of equality. Thereby, we'll discuss the constitutional provisions of equality in terms of Indian Constitution. Then, of course, we'll be talking about the government schemes in India which are related to equality, promoting equality, reducing inequalities. And then we'll be talking about what is the global picture. How do we see inequalities in the global context? And then what are the types of inequalities which exist? Moreover, we'll also be understanding how can we tackle these inequalities that exist in India, or what are the ways through which we can ensure that there is less and less of inequality and more of equality. So we'll be talking about how to establish formal equality, what is differential treatment, and finally the very important concept of affirmative action. So let's get started. Now first thing first, let us break down and let us understand what do you mean by this term equality. देखिए बहुत ही simple तरीका है. Three concepts which are integrated to each other. If you understand these three concepts, you will be able to understand what equality is. Now there are some people who believe that absence of privileges is equality. So let me give you an example. Now to understand equality, we need to look at these three aspects. First is absence of privileges. So let's say in a society there is section A and section B. Section A is born with certain kind of privileges that already puts them ahead of B. Now you need to understand this aspect because there are various people in a society which are born with certain privileges. Now, it is the duty of the state to ensure that those who don't have those basic privileges or opportunities, they at least get equality of opportunity. So again, let's say there is one person Ram and there is another person Sham. Do both of them, let's say, have the same set of talents? They are very bright, but do they have the same opportunity to progress in life? Did Ram get the same education as Sham? Was he able to fight for competitive exams? Or was there this inequality in terms of the opportunity that he got? So once you understand absence of privileges as well as equality of opportunity, you then move on to equality of status. So we as a society often attach importance to certain professions more than the other. So let's say somebody is a doctor. So you would think of this person as, maybe the most important person in the society, or maybe you attach a lot of importance to his or her existence. But when you talk about, let's say, a cobbler or somebody who is sweeping your floor, you might not attach the same kind of importance. But you need to understand that you need a cobbler as much as you need a doctor, or a sweeper as much as you need a teacher. So the third aspect here is equality of status. Now throughout the course of this lecture, we will be looking at equality with these three lenses. One, that is absence of privileges. In some aspects, we will understand how state ensures that there is equality of opportunity, and then we will also be talking about equality of status. So these are the three prime key areas which we will be looking at throughout the course of this lecture. Okay, now let us look at this. Dimensions of equality. So basically what we'll be talking about here is which are the various types of equality that we seek in a society. Now this is what I mean when I talk about types of equality. Let us understand each one of them one by one. First thing first, let us talk about political equality. Now when I say political equality, I mean whether all the citizens of a country are entitled to same set of political rights. For example, do everyone in your country exercises right to vote? What do I mean by this? I mean, does the country have universal adult franchise? Now, what is universal adult franchise? Every citizen who is 18 plus years of age, whether that person has right to vote or not, irrespective of the class that you come from, irrespective of the caste that you come from, of the sex that you belong to, whatever. Each and every citizen has right to vote. This is one dimension of political equality which is called universal adult franchise. The only requisite is the minimum age qualification, which for example in India is 18 plus. Now this might vary from country to country, but that is applicable on every citizen of that country. So the first aspect of political equality is right to vote or universal adult franchise. Moving on, Article 326. This is very, very important. So besides having right to vote, आपको ये भी देखना पड़ेगा कि आपके देश के लोगों के पास do they have the right to contest elections? Very important. And this contest election ka right comes from Article 326, which says that every citizen of this country has the right to participate in the political affairs. So you can become a member of the legislature either at the union level or at the state level by contesting for elections. Of course, there are certain qualifications, but that is applicable to every section of the society, every person in the country, irrespective of the caste, class, creed or the sex that you belong to. So remember, one aspect of political equality is right to vote. Another aspect of political equality is right to contest election. And of course, when you move it over to broader scope, you also talk about free legal aid. So, is it that every citizen of your country is able to approach judiciary? And if this person is not having requisite means to reach judiciary or to have a representation, does the country give free legal aid or not? So, to conclude it up, to sum it up, the broader definition would be right to vote and right to contest elections. But at the same time, if we expand it, we need to look at it from free legal aid perspective also. So that was about political equality. Now, let us talk about social equality. Now, whenever we say social equality, we need to look at it from society's perspective. So, does every citizen living in a society has access to basic resources which are required for this person's survival and a minimum standard of living? So, आपको देखना पड़ेगा, is everybody getting education? Does everyone have access to healthcare? Or do you see everyone being able to afford basic housing? Now, obviously, social equality, the idea of social equality will expand as the country progresses, as the society progresses. So maybe let's say 15 years back, the focus was only on, let's say, education, or let's say the focus was only on nourishment. कि खाना मिल जाए तो काफ़ी है. But today we are also talking about education, we are talking about health care, right? So, social equality की definition might change as the society progresses, might broaden as the society progresses, but the basic premise remains the same, that whether all the people living in a society are able to access basic minimum resources so that they can survive and have a basic minimum standard of living. So, we can include schemes like Poshan Abhiyan here, midday meal here, which are, taken care of by the government to promote social equality in the country. Now, what do you mean by economic equality? Does that mean all the money that is with the Ambanis and the Adanis should be distributed fairly between all the citizens of the country? Let's pool in all the money that we have and let us divide it equally. No. So, economic equality would be fairness in economic sphere. You cannot talk about absolute equality. You cannot say that every person in the country should have the same amount of money. But what we need to ensure is whether the economic situations in our country are fair or not. ऐसा तो नहीं that there are certain sections of the society who are taxed unnecessarily or they are taxed unfairly, or let's say there's somebody who is doing 10 hours of the same work but getting less of payment. So when we talk about economic equality, the key word to remember here is economic fairness. And how do you know whether it is fair or not? You need to check, are there fair wages? कहीं आपके यहाँ पर bonded labor तो नहीं हो रहा, कहीं ऐसा तो नहीं that there is begar where people are not paid for the work that they are doing or not compensated fairly for the work that they are doing. So are the wages fair? Is there equal pay for equal work? And for that we have schemes like Manrega, which ensures right to work, which ensures that people get at least some days of work in an year. And then of course very recently we had a revolutionary step coming up in India, which was the entry of women in armed forces. Now you can look at this from the perspective of economic equality, which had gender dimension in it. So also understand, as somebody who is preparing for competitive exams, you need to look at it in a very holistic domain. So when you talk about gender equality, it can be applied in all three aspects. Look at it. When I talk about gender equality in political context, do women of your country have the right to vote? Are they able to contest elections? Are they able to have adequate healthcare facilities? Are they able to get enough nourishment? And then you need to talk about, are they able to enter into all spheres of economic activity or not? Is there equal pay for equal work or not? So when you combine all these three, then you can talk about whether India actually is moving towards gender equality or not. So I hope these three aspects of equality are clear to you: political equality, social equality and economic equality. Now this is what I was talking about, right, in terms of economic equality and the gender quotient of it. So this is about how women officers now are allowed permanent commission. Of course, it is in some specified branches. There is still a long way to go in here, but this is a good example to understand that what economic equality means in the gender context. Now let us talk about what are the constitutional provisions that are related to equality. Now, even before we move to fundamental rights and understand which are those fundamental rights which are related to equality, we need to know that there is a preamble to the Indian Constitution that talks about equality as well. So, if you look at the preamble to the Indian Constitution, which is an introduction to the Indian Constitution, it says equality of status and of opportunity. So even the preamble recognizes equality in India and talks about equality of status and of opportunity. Now talking about the constitutional provisions, we have this very important right, that is right to equality. Article 14 to Article 18. Please take note of it. Of course, we will be going into each of these articles in detail in further lectures. But here you need to understand that we have an entire Article 14, 15, 16, 17 and 18 that deals with the aspect of equality in India. That is right to equality, which is a fundamental right. Okay. Now, are there some government schemes that deal with providing equality, ensuring that there is equality in India? Schemes like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. This is one aspect of gender equality, whereby you want to ensure gender equality in the country. Pradhan Mantri Employment Generation Program. Again, the aspect of economic equality in India. Schemes like Stand Up India scheme, which talk about promoting entrepreneurship in the country. Again, the aspect of economic equality. Now, transgender persons, protection of rights. Again, that would be in the aspect of gender equality, because when you talk about gender, you don't just need male and female. We're talking about the third gender as well. Then Equal Remuneration Act, which talks about equal pay for equal work. Again, the aspect of economic equality. Sexual harassment of women at workplace. There should be protection and prevention. So the idea here is, this is based on the Vishakha guidelines. Again, the idea is to promote gender equality. And then we have 33% of reservation for women in the Panchayati Raj system. Remember, the idea of political equality we discussed. Since we want to promote that everybody has a say in the working of the country, in the working of the institutions. Therefore, we have reservation for women at the panchayat level and at the municipal corporation level. Then, commitment to work towards sustainable development goals. This is very important. In one of the lectures before, I have discussed with you about these SDGs and how you have to relate with these SDGs what the Indian government is trying to achieve. So SDGs, of course, are a set of goals that countries of the world are targeting to achieve by the year 2030. There are 17 in number, and many of them actually relate to the idea of equality. So Indian government is committed to work towards these goals and achieve them by the deadline, that is 2030. So that is also one of the ways through which government or the Indian state tries to promote equality in the country. So whenever you look at any government scheme, you need to look at it as to how and what does it do. So if there is a scheme that talks about gender equality, is there a scheme that talks about economic equality? Do we have some schemes that ensure social equality in the country? And once you start looking at them from this perspective, it also gets easier for you to quote them in your answers. So if there is a question on gender, you might as well quote schemes like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. And if there is a question that talks about economic equality in India, you might want to talk about schemes like Stand Up India scheme. So that is the importance of these schemes, and you must know a few of them and use them in your answers. Now here are some data that we need to look at when we talk about inequalities in the global context. Now these are the data that you can very well use in your answers. This is the data that you need to quote when you're writing your essays. Look at the stark inequalities that exist world over. And this is of course according to the UNDP report. So richest 50 individuals have income greater than 40 crore poorest people. Just look at this data and we'll tell you how unequal the world that we live in is. Look at this. First world countries with 25% of the population. So the population that they have is 25% of the world population, but they own 86% of world's industry. Just look at the contrast here. Then, residents of advanced countries consume 3 times much water and energy as compared to a resident of India and China, which shows you the difference between the developed world and the developing world. Look at this. The industrialized countries of the world, they're contributing 2/3 of the global carbon emissions. That's huge. Then, poorest 40% of the world receive only 5% of global income. Now, if you look at these data and if you quote them in your answers, it is a proof in itself that we don't live in an equal world. There are inequalities that exist, they are a reality, and that is why it is very important to focus on at least reducing them. Obviously, we can't talk of a world where there are no inequalities, right? But what government and the world leaders should try and achieve is there should be reduction in these inequalities. So look at this data. You might want to quote it in your answers or might want to use them in your essays. Now let us talk about this, the distinction between natural inequalities and social inequalities, because this is a major source of debate amongst the scholars. So there are some people who believe that this distinction exists, whereas there are certain set of people who believe, certain set of scholars who say that this distinction is no longer applicable. So let us look at what this debate is about and what exactly do we mean when we talk about natural inequalities and social inequalities. So please understand, when we talk about natural inequalities, we mean the inequalities which are not created by the society. These are due to the characteristics and the traits with which somebody is born. So let's say somebody is physically disabled and is not able to perform certain kind of activities. This has not been done by any society. This was something that the person was born with and therefore that would be put under the category of natural inequality. So for the longest time it was believed that natural inequalities are very difficult to reverse because they are not created by the society. Whereas social inequalities are inequalities which are the product of society. So let's say society decided that women would be responsible for household affairs and men are going to go and work. There was an inequality that they were not born with, but it was created by the society. Women will not be occupying major sources of national leadership positions, whereas men would be sitting at these high offices. This was not something that they were born with. This was something that was created by the society. So, to put it simply, natural inequalities will not be created by society. This would be something that a person is born with, whereas social inequalities would be something that would be created by the society. They are the product of the society. So, for the longest time, it was believed that social inequalities are easier to eliminate, whereas it is very difficult to eliminate natural inequalities. Now, I'll tell you what was the debate about. So let's say somebody who is blind, somebody who is not able to see would obviously come under the category of natural inequality because this was something that the person was born with. But here is the catch. Today we have something known as Braille. We have various scientific advancements and technologies using which this blind person can read, write. So does that mean natural inequalities cannot be reversed or at least reduced? Now this is the big question. So scholars say when you create this distinction, it comes to our mind कि भैया state की जिम्मेदारी तो सिर्फ यहीं तक है. So state is responsible only for eliminating social inequalities, which is not the complete truth. Why? Because when you look at natural inequalities and the advancement in medical science and technology, state must also do something to reduce or at least to, if not eliminate, at least reduce natural inequalities. So what is the conclusion? So here is the conclusion. Scholars say we can't divide this into watertight compartments and say, okay, this is natural inequality, so we can't do anything about it. Okay, this is social inequality, so let's say we can do something about it. Let's have certain schemes for it. But what is the solution? The solution is you need to look at inequalities from the perspective of choice. Now, if somebody is unequal because of choice exercised by this person. The person decided not to go to school. Listen to my point. The person decided not to go to school. Enough opportunities were available. There were schools. There was no pressure. This person was not under economic backwardness, but decided not to go to school and ended up earning less than somebody who went to school, college, and ended up getting a package of, let's say, 25 lakhs. This is an inequality which was created due to choice. So scholars say the focus of state should not be to work on the inequalities that are created by choice, because there is hardly anything you can do about it. But if inequalities are not a product of choice, rather a product of circumstances, rather a product of society, then it is the responsibility of the state to eliminate these kinds of inequalities. So I just wanted to give you a perspective, since NCERT also talks about it, as to what are natural inequalities and what are social inequalities, and why this distinction is getting blurred over time. Okay, now let us talk about the ideological perspective of equality. So there are certain isms, there are certain ideologies that are very, very important when you talk about equality, and you need to understand them in order to understand equality better. First thing first, what is feminism? Now feminism is of course related to the idea of gender equality, and the definition of feminism is very, very simple. So who is a feminist? Feminist is somebody who believes that men and women are equal and therefore they deserve equal rights. So what would be the political idea of feminism? Men and women are equal and therefore they deserve equal rights. feminism is opposed to the idea of patriarchy. Now, what is patriarchy? In a very, very basic sense, patriarchy means a system where the head of the family, head of the institution, head of the country is a male member. And therefore, it is a system whereby the social aspect, whereby the economic aspect, the cultural aspect believes that men should have more power and more rights over women. And they should be able to exercise it over women as well. Whereas feminism is opposed to this idea and believes that men and women are equal and therefore they deserve equal rights. I hope that makes sense. Now here, it is also important to understand this distinction between sex and gender that feminists all over the world talk about and is very, very important to understand. Now when I say sex, it is something that somebody is born. So let's say somebody is born a female and somebody is born a male. This is a distinction of sex, that is the identity with which you are born. Now this is a natural difference that exists in nature. But when I decided, okay, so this female would be restricted to household spheres, she cannot go out and work, she does not deserve to be educated, or she is timid, she is weak. I started associating certain stereotypes with the idea of a woman, and I decided that the sphere of political aspects, the sphere of public domain would be open only to male members of the society. They would be the one who will be responsible for earning bread. They would be controlling major sources of power in the country. This is where I go into gender differences. So, scholars believe that sex is biological in nature, right? And gender is a social construct, which means gender identities are actually created by the society, whereas sex is a biological difference. So, this is the entire idea of sex and gender. Sex is biological, whereas gender is a social construct. What do I mean when I say social construct? It is created by society. So society decided that women should be responsible for household work, whereas male members should go out and work. This was not something that was biological in nature. So finally, what do feminist world over say? They believe that this public-private distinction is responsible for various areas of gender inequality all over the world, whereby you believe that public is for men, whereas private sphere is for women. Once you start blurring away this, you would see women occupying major sources of power. You would see women going out and work. So if you really want to bring about equality in the gender quotient, you need to understand feminism, which believes that this public-private distinction should end and women should be able to enter the public affairs as well. And related to the first slide that I gave you, political equality, social equality and economic equality. Another important ideology that we need to discuss here is the ideology of Marxism, which will also relate to the ideology of socialism. Now, when we talk about Marxism, we mean the ideas propagated by this very important person in political history of the world, that is Karl Marx. So what did he say? Now if you look at the root or the idea of Marxism, Karl Marx का कहना है कि दुनिया में जो सारी परेशानी है, ये जो inequality है between the rich and the poor, the working class and the producer class, the ones who are the owners of resources and the ones who are working for these people, is the ownership which is private in nature. तो वो ये कहते हैं कि अगर आप दुनिया में कोई भी inequality निकाल कर देख लीजिए, let's say you talk about social equality, it is actually stemming from economic inequality. पहले तो ये समझिए. तो कार्ल मार्क्स के लिए जो सारी परेशानी की जड़ है, जो रूट कॉज है, that is economic inequality, because this inequality provides support to other forms of social inequality, which may be, let's say, differences of rank, class inequality, etc. So one thing that you need to understand here is, for Karl Marx, the problem is economic in nature, right? And what is the problem? The problem is all the resources, all the means of production are in the hands of the producer class. So Karl Marx says, आपने जो सारे resources दिए हुए हैं, आपने जो सारे oil, land, forest, capital दी हुई है, वो किसके पास है? It is with the people who are producing. And now what happens is, those who are working for these producers only get basic minimum wages. Now understand this. The producer is getting all the profit, whereas the worker is only getting wages. Now when the producer gets profit and the worker gets wages, the difference between them starts to increase, and it never ends. Rather, it keeps increasing and increasing and increasing, because the wages are not fair, and all the surplus value, which in this case means profit, goes to the producer. So what is the solution, you ask? Karl Marx says we need to ensure that this private ownership of property ends, that there should be no private ownership of property. You need to ensure that there is no private ownership of property, which means that in a country there should not be this bunch of producer class which is owning all the land, all the resources, all the capital. Rather, there should be public control over these essential things. Now, of course, he goes on and talks about how you can eliminate this producer class, how there should be no distinction between the producer class or the working class and the producing class, and there should be absolutely no class distinction. And that's why he goes on and says creation of a classless and a stateless society. Of course, we don't need to go into that extreme form, and here is where a more doable kind of a philosophy comes in, that is the philosophy of socialism, the ideology rather of socialism. Now, what does socialism tells you? What is the prime idea on which socialism is based? Now, before we go on to liberalism, we need to talk about socialism. Now, socialism again says that the problem is ownership. The problem is ownership is in few hands. So, what is the solution? They say there should be social ownership of means of production. So these means of production, which are actually responsible for inequalities in a society, should not be in the hands of few people. कुछ लोगों के हाथ में ये means of production नहीं होने चाहिए. Rather, these means of production should be state controlled. So socialism talks about state control of these resources, because only then you will be able to minimize the existing inequality. Why? Because there would be resources which will be justly distributed, and when you distribute resources justly, you will be able to eliminate or at least reduce inequalities in a society. So simply put, socialism believes in the idea of state ownership of means of production, so that these means of production are distributed justly or fairly between all the members of the society. Now, if you look at your NCRTs, they also talk about Ram Manohar Lohia here. So you might get a question on prelims about this particular topic, where they may ask you that which are the 5 kinds of inequalities that Ram Manohar Lohia believes in. Now, this is a very important concept as well, because Ram Manohar Lohia believed that, when you talk about inequalities, there are not one but many forms of inequalities that exist, and each of them will require a separate action plan. So you need to understand it this way. Ram Manohar Lohia does not look at inequality in a singular context. He says you can't look at them in a very myopic singular view, whereby you believe that one action will solve all kinds of inequalities. No. And for this, he creates a distinction. He tells you that there are 5 kinds of inequalities that exist, and each of them will require a separate strategy, a separate approach from the government. Only then you will be able to eliminate or reduce inequalities. First is the distinction between man and woman. So there is gender inequality, Ram Manohar Lohia says. Then there is inequality based on skin color. Then caste based inequalities. The inequalities, that is, of course, because this is in that context, colonial role of some countries over others. So you would see Britain ruling over other countries. And then comes economic inequality. Besides these 5, he says for 5 of them, you would need 5 revolutions. So it's a very, very important aspect. Ram Manohar Lohia says that to deal with inequalities, you can't have a singular approach. Point number 1, you can't tackle them in one go. You need to look at them separately and you need to have action plan for each one of them. And then he gives you a categorization of 5 kinds of inequalities that exist, and each of them will require a separate revolution. Now please understand, he added 2 more to this list. He said you would need 5 revolutions to tackle these 5 kinds of inequalities. At the same time, you would need 2 more revolutions. Take note of this. One revolution would be to provide civil liberties. There is inequality in civil liberties also. So there are some people who get right to vote, whereas others don't. Some can contest elections, whereas others can't. Some have free legal aid, whereas others don't. So the first thing that you need to do, besides this 5, 6th one is to have a revolution for ensuring equality in civil liberties. And finally he says we need a revolution to eliminate violence. To eliminate arms and move in the direction of satyagraha. So here is the conclusion. 5 plus 2 would be 7. These are the 7 revolutions, the theory of 7 revolutions suggested by Ram Manohar Lohia, which is also called Sapt Kranti. Please take note of this. You might get a question in your prelims, or you might want to, write this when you're writing your mains answer. The 7 revolution or the Sapt Kranti cannot be looked at singularly. You need to have 7 different revolutions for these 7 different inequalities, and that would be called as the 7 revolution or the Sapt Kranti of Ram Manohar Lohia. Okay, now again, a very important aspect. As opposed to the idea of socialism that believes that there should be state ownership of material resources, the resources of the country should be owned by the state, we have this very important ideology of liberalism. And for liberalism, the most important virtue is competition. So liberalism believes having state ownership of property or state ownership of resources won't solve the problem, because the most important concept is the concept or the principle of competition. So liberalism says what you need to do is you need to leave people alone so that they can compete. And when they'll compete, whoever would be the most efficient, whoever would be the most talented will get the reward. And this is a very fair way to distribute resources and rewards in the society. So I can't give 10 marks to everybody sitting in my class. If somebody has worked hard, that person should get 10. If somebody has not, maybe average 5, and if the person has not studied anything, the person should get a 0. So liberalism says it is not that liberty is opposed to the idea of equality. That's not true. Actually, liberalism promotes equality by recognizing merit. And how do you reach to merit? By providing competition. But what is the role of state then? All the state has to do is to ensure that this competition is fair. And this is very important, because let's say there is a race and somebody is starting the race from here, whereas B is starting the race from here. So obviously these are not having the same starting point, and when they are not starting from the same starting point, you can't say that they are competing fairly. Look at this, a very important aspect. Replace it with a real day example. Let's say A is born in a caste which has been dominated for years, or maybe belongs to a class where this person cannot afford good education, whereas B is having all sorts of education facilities, is born in a family which has been, family of riches for years. So you can't say they have the same starting point, and therefore state has to play a very, very important role here. What liberalists say is state might intervene, but that is only so that a minimum standard of living and equal opportunity is provided to all. Once you do that, once you provide equal opportunity to everybody, once you provide minimum standard of living to everybody, your work is done. Now you have to let competition play its part, and whoever is the winner gets to be better in life than the others. So this is the entire idea of liberalism, and the idea says that liberty and equality are not necessarily against each other. Rather, if you bring about liberty, it will promote equality on its own. Now here is the big question. How do we promote equality? हमने equality समझ ली, हमने equality की dimensions देख लिए, inequalities देख ली, कितनी तरीके की inequalities exist करती है वो भी समझ लिया. But here is the big question. How can we promote equality? What are the ways through which equality can be promoted? And here are some very important things to understand here. One way to ensure equality is formal equality. ये देखिए बड़ा ही सिंपल है. मैंने आपसे कहा बहुत सारी ऐसी inequalities हैं जो आज हमारे सामने exist करती हैं. The first thing is to do away with these inequalities. सालों से जो ये inequalities exist करती हैं, पहला step आपको ये करना है कि इनको ख़त्म करना है. For example, there was a time when women were not having right to vote, or there was a time when there was untouchability practiced in India. तो आपने सबसे पहले क्या करा? आपने untouchability को eliminate करा आर्टिकल 17 जो कहता है abolition of untouchability. किस चीज का एग्जाम्पल है ये? Formal equality का. So formal equality simply means when you are ending the existing privileges and existing inequalities. जो सालों से inequalities चलती आई हैं political spheres में, social spheres में, आप पहले उसको खत्म कर रहे हैं so that there is no privilege that anybody is enjoying. So for example, we have Article 18 that talks about abolition of titles. So nobody in India can, use titles, for example, Maharaja of XYZ. What is that? What is promotion of equality in the formal sense? So when you talk about formal equality, it simply means an effort or an attempt to do away the existing set of privileges or the existing set of inequalities that exist. So all you need to do is, let's say Indian Constitution prohibits discrimination on the basis of caste, creed, sex, religion, place of birth. We have Article 14 to 18. Then all you have to do is you have to ensure that there is no special privileges and inequalities. Now the point is this enough? Is it okay or is it sufficient to just establish formal equality in a country? Now understand it this way. Establishing formal equality is very, very important, and it is definitely the first step. The first step that you have to take is you have to eliminate the existing inequalities and you have to ensure that no section is getting special privileges. But this is not sufficient because the inequalities that have existed for years together have left certain sections being disadvantaged, has left certain sections of the society needing help. And this is where the second aspect of what we can do to establish equality comes up. But remember, the first is formal equality, and let us move to the second one now, that is providing differential treatments. Yes, you might have to do this. You might have to provide differential treatment sometime. Now let me give you an example here. Let's say there is somebody who is physically disabled and wants to attend school, right? Now here is the problem. There are no ramps in school. So let's say the school administration decided, by the way, we also have a government scheme for this, which is called Sugamya Bharat, Accessible India, which ensures that all the infrastructure in the country is disabled friendly. Now my example was, you decided to construct a ramp in the school so that these people who are physically disabled can go and reach the classrooms and have access to education. Now look at this. Somebody who is ekdam se fit, physically ekdam okay, will not get to use the ramp. Now some of you might say this is differential treatment. You're treating the person who is disabled, in a better way than you're treating somebody who is physically able, because you're not letting that person use the ramp, whereby you established, this ramp for person who was disabled. Or let's say in an exam, somebody who is not able to see gets a 30-minute extra time, or people with certain disabilities might get certain protections. Now here is the question, this is differential treatment. Then how is it related to equality? Listen, sometimes formal equality is not enough. It is important, but it is not sufficient. So what you have to do is, you have to treat certain people differently to ensure that they are able to compete with the other set of the people. They are able to have the same starting point than the others. So for example, there is a provision that if you are making women work late at night, you have to ensure that there are enough transport facilities, enough commutation facilities. Now some of you may think of it as differential treatment, which it is, but again ये differential treatment क्यों दिया गया? ताकि equality establish की जा सके. So what is the conclusion? You need to combine formal equality along with differential treatment to ensure that the society is moving towards the path of equality. So understand that differential treatment is not bad. It is required to ensure that equality prevails. Now connected to the idea of differential treatment is the idea of affirmative action. आपको पता होना चाहिए affirmative action क्या होता है. Now when we say affirmative, we mean positive. The word affirmative here means positive. So हम सब ने ये बात मानी that formal equality is not enough. You need it, but it is not sufficient. To do away with inequalities that have existed for generations together, जो deep rooted हैं, जिनकी जड़ें बहुत मजबूत हैं, आपको उसके लिए कुछ positive steps तो लेने पड़ेंगे. You would need to give certain positive actions. You need to take certain positive actions to ensure that the inequalities that have been existing, generations to generation should come to an end. You need to do something about it. And this something is the action that you need to take. So basically, a state has to take certain positive steps to ensure equality in a country, equality in a society. And that is why affirmative action means positive discrimination. So in a way, you are providing certain members of the society something more than others. You are providing some members of the society something more than others. So in a way, you are discriminating, but this discrimination is positive in nature because you are providing this something which is given to people who have been disadvantaged. Maybe generations to generation, maybe they are disadvantaged due to their economic status, or maybe they are disadvantaged due to their gender identity. The point here is, when you are doing this, you are discriminating, but it is a positive discrimination because you are doing it to minimize and eliminate social inequalities. So a very good example of it is reservation. Very recently also there was a debate around EWS reservation, and after the EWS reservation verdict by the Supreme Court, EWS reservation has been upheld. So the court has said that it is very, very much constitutional. I mean, of course, there has been a judgment on various fronts here, but the point is EWS reservation has been upheld, right? It has been certified by the court that it is very much here to stay. Now, what are you doing here? You're giving certain people, certain section of society, certain reserved seats, right? We have this in various other domains also. Now, when you have these reserved seats, you need to understand that you are treating certain people differently. You are giving them something extra. But this discrimination is positive in nature because you are identifying these people on the basis of their economic status. Because they are not able to compete with the mainstream population in this context, you decided to give them reservations. So the fact of the matter here is, affirmative action simply means the positive steps taken by the government to ensure the inequalities that are existing should be reduced or eliminated, and for this they might need to do discrimination sometimes, but it is a positive discrimination or a reverse discrimination. Now, of course, it has been a society-long debate, year-long debate as to is affirmative action good or bad. There are various arguments that are raised. There are certain sections who believe that, of course, affirmative actions is needed. There is huge wealth gap. There are so many people facing social inequalities. There are so many people who have faced the problems generation to generation, and to help them move up the ladder, you have to have affirmative action. There are people who say that leads to integration in a society. It can help promote diversity. It can help people come out of poverty, etc., etc., etc. But then there are people who believe that affirmative action has certain cons to it as well. जैसे कि it might not lead to better assimilation of these people into the society. So society would always view them as people who are separate, as people who are not part of the society as a whole. There are chances that affirmative action might create social tensions sometimes. And then there are people who believe that affirmative action should be a short-term plan. We should be moving with it, but there should be a deadline to it, and it should not become a long-term concept. Now here is the fact of the matter. Whether affirmative action is good or bad, is needed or not, you have to look at it from the country that you belong to or the society that you come from. You need to analyze the situations in your society. You need to analyze the social and the political and the economic inequalities that exist, and then you have to carve out a plan as to, do you need an affirmative action? And if you need it, till what extent? Should there be some rationalization? Isn't it the responsibility of the state to ensure that the benefits of affirmative action actually reach the people who deserve it? So whenever you look at this aspect, please be very balanced in your approach. Don't take any extreme positions. Try and understand with a rational mind that affirmative action is needed, but what we need to do is to ensure that the benefit of affirmative action actually reaches people who deserve it or people who need it, so that